Did he mean that he had looked at the river and considered it from the point of view as if he were a rabbit? There was slack water immediately below the bridge, with a low shelf bank where they could get out easily. That seemed too much to hope for. Or did he simply mean that they had better hurry up and take a chance on being able to do what he himself, as a bird, could do without difficulty? This seemed more likely. Suppose one of them did jump out of the boat and go down with the current. What would that tell the others if that rabbit did not come back? And poor Hazel looked about him. Silver was licking Bigwig's wounded shoulder, and Blackberry was fidgeting on and off on the edge of the boat, strung up, able to feel only too clearly all that Hazel felt himself. As he still hesitated, Kihar let out a squawk. "Yark! You damn rabbits is no good. What I do, I show you." And Kihar tumbled clumsily off the bow of the boat. There was no gap between the boat and the dark mouth of the culvert, and sitting low in the water, like a mallard duck, he floated into the tunnel and vanished. And peering after him, Hazel could at first see nothing, but then he could see Kihar's shape black against the light at the far end. He floated into daylight, turned sideways, and passed out of view. "Well, what does that prove?" said Blackberry, his teeth chattering. "He may have flown off the surface, or put his great webbed feet down. It's not that he's soaked through and shivering and twice as heavy with wet fur." But then Kihar reappeared on the bridge above them. "You go now," he said shortly. But still the wretched Hazel hung back. His leg had begun to ache again, and the sight of Bigwig of all rabbits, at the end of his wits, half unconscious, playing no part in this dangerous adventure, lowered his courage still more. He knew that he had not got it in him to jump into that water. The horrible situation was beyond him. He stumbled on the slippery planking, and as he sat up, he found Fiver beside him. "I'll go, Hazel," said Fiver quietly. "I think it'll be all right." He put his front paws on the edge of the boat, and then on the instant all of the rabbits froze motionless. One of the does stamped on the puddled floor of the boat, for above them came the sounds of approaching footsteps and men's voices, and the smell of a burning white stick. Kihar flew away. Not a rabbit moved. The footsteps grew nearer, and the voices louder. They were on the bridge above them, no further away than the height of a hedge. Every one of the rabbits was seized by the instinct to run, to go underground, and Hazel saw Hyacinthale looking at him, and returned her stare, willing her with all his might to keep still. The voices, the smell of men's sweat, of leather, of white sticks, the pain down his leg, the damp chuckling tunnel at his ear. He had known them all before. How could the men not see him? They must see him. He was literally lying at their feet, and he was wounded, and they were coming to get him. But then the sound and smells receded into the distance. The thudding of the men's footsteps diminished. The men had crossed the bridge without looking over the edge, and they were gone. Hazel came to it. "That settles it," he said. "Everyone's got to swim. Come on, Bluebell. You said you were a water rabbit, so follow me." He got on the edge and followed it along to the bow. But it was Pipkin that he found next to him. "Quick, Hazelraw," said Pipkin, twitching and trembling. "I'll come too. Just let's get this over with." Hazel closed his eyes and let himself fall over the side into the water. As in the Enborn River, there was an instant shock of cold. But more than this, and at once, he could feel the pull of the current. He was being drawn away by a force like a high wind, yet smooth and silent. He was drifting helplessly down a suffocating cold run with no hold for his feet, and full of fear he paddled and struggled and got his head up and took a breath, scrabbled his claws against rough bricks under water, and then lost again as he was dragged on. Then the current slackened, the run vanished, and the dark became light, and there were leaves and sky above him once more. And still struggling, he bumped into something hard, bounced off it, struck it again, and for a moment he touched soft ground with his paws. He floundered forward and found that he was dragging himself through liquidy mud. He was out on to a clammy bank, and he lay panting for several moments, and wiped his face and opened his eyes. And the first thing he saw was Pipkin, plastered with mud, crawling to the bank only a few feet away. And full of elation and confidence, and all his terrors forgotten, Hazel crawled over to Pipkin, and together they slipped into the undergrowth. He said nothing, and Pipkin did not seem to expect him to. From the shelter of a clump of purple loosestrife, they looked back at the river. The water came out from the bridge into a second pool. All around them, on both banks, trees and undergrowth grew close together. There was almost a kind of swamp here, and it was hard to tell where the water ended and the woodlands began. Plants grew in clumps, both in and out of the muddy shallows. The bottom was covered with fine silt and mud that was only half water, and it was in this that the rabbits had made two paths as they dragged themselves to the shore. And running diagonally across the pool from the brickwork of the bridge near the opposite bank to a point a little below them on their own side was a metal grating of thin vertical iron rods. And in the season when men would cut reeds and weeds, the river weeds, drifting in tangled mats, would be held against this grating and raked out of the river by men wearing waders, who would then pile it to be used as compost. The left bank was a great rubbish heap of rotting weeds among the trees. It was a green, rank-smelling place, humid and enclosed. "Good old Kihar," said Hazel, gazing with satisfaction at the fetid solitude. "I should have trusted him." And as he spoke, a third rabbit came swimming out from under the bridge. The sight of this rabbit, struggling in the current like a fly in a spider's web, filled them both with fear. To watch another in danger can be almost as bad as sharing it yourself. The rabbit fetched up against this metal grating, drifted a little way along it, found the bottom, and crawled out of the water. It was Blackavar. He lay on his side and seemed unaware of Hazel and Pipkin when they came up to him. After a while, however, he began to cough. He vomited some water and sat up. "Are you all right?" asked Hazel. "More or less," said Blackavar. "But do we have to do much more tonight, sir? I'm very tired." "No, you can rest here," said Hazel. "But why did you risk it on your own? We might already have gone under and drowned, for all you know." "I thought you gave me an order," replied Blackavar. "I see," said Hazel. "Well, at that rate, you're going to find us a very sloppy group, I'm afraid. Was there anyone else who was going to jump in when you jumped in?" "I think they're too nervous," answered Blackavar. "You can't blame them." "No, but the trouble is that anything can happen," said Hazel, worrying. "They might all go tharn just sitting there. The men may come back. If only we could tell them it's all right." "I think we can, sir," said Blackavar. "Unless I'm wrong, it's only a matter of slipping up the bank there and down the other side. Shall I go?" Hazel was disconcerted. From what he had gathered, this was a disgraced prisoner from Ephrata, not even a member of the Owsla, apparently, and he had just said that he felt exhausted. Boy, he was going to take some living up to. "We'll both go," he said. "Hullaru, can you stay here and keep a lookout? With any luck, rabbits will start coming through to you. Help them if you can." And Hazel and Blackavar slipped through the dripping undergrowth. The grass path which crossed the bridge ran above them at the top of the steep bank. They scrambled the bank and looked out cautiously from the long grass at the edge of the path. The track was empty, and there was nothing to be heard or smelled. They crossed it and reached the end of the bridge on the upstream side. And here the bank dropped almost straight down to the river, about 6 feet below. Blackavar scrambled down without hesitation, but Hazel followed more slowly. And just above the bridge, between it and a thorn bush, was a ledge which overhung the water. And out in the river, a few feet away, the boat lay stuck against the weedy bridge. "Silver," said Hazel. "Fiver, come on, get them in the water. It's all right below the bridge. Get the does in first if you can. There's no time to lose. Those men might be coming back." But it was no easy matter to rouse the torpid, bewildered does, and to make them understand what they had to do. Silver went from one to another. Dandelion, as soon as he saw Hazel on the bank, went at once to the bow and plunged in. Speedwell followed, but as Fiver was about to go, Silver stopped him. "If all our bucks go, Hazel," he said, "the does will be left alone, and I don't think they'll manage it." Oh, they'll listen to Thlalie, sir, said Blackavar, and before Hazel could reply, I think he's the one that needs to get them going. Bigwig was still lying in the water at the bottom of the boat, in the place he had taken up when they first arrived at the bridge. He seemed to be asleep, but when Silver nuzzled him, he raised his head and looked around in a dazed manner. Oh, hello, Silver, he said. Oh, I'm afraid this shoulder of mine's going to be a problem. I feel terribly cold, too. Where's Hazel? Silver explained. Bigwig got up with some difficulty, and they could see he was still bleeding. He limped to the edge of the boat and climbed up on it. Heisenfley, he said, your friends aren't going to get any wetter, so we'll get them to jump in now. One by one, don't you think? Then there's no risk of them scratching or hurting each other as they swim. And in spite of what Blackavar had said, it was a long time before everyone had left the boat. There were, in fact, 10 does altogether, although none of the rabbits knew this number. And although one or two responded to Bigwig's patient urging, several were so exhausted they simply remained huddled where they were, or looked blankly at the water until others were brought to take their place. And from time to time, Bigwig would ask one of the bucks to give a lead, and in this way Acorn, Hawkbit, and Bluebell all scrambled over the edge. The injured doe, Thraonlosa, was clearly in a bad way, and Blackberry and Thuthuthane swam through together, one in front of her and one behind. And as darkness closed in, the rain stopped. Hazel and Blackavar went back to the bank of the pool below the bridge. The sky cleared, and the oppression lifted as the thunderclouds moved away towards the east. But it was Fu Inlay before Bigwig himself came through the bridge with Silver and Fiver. It was much as ever he could do to keep afloat, and when he reached the grating, he simply rolled over in the water, his belly up like a dying fish. He drifted into the shallows, and with Silver's help, managed to drag himself out of the water. Hazel and several of the others were waiting for him, but he cut them short with a flash of his old bullying manner. Come on, get out of the way, he said. I'm going to sleep now, Hazel, and Frith help you if you tell me I'm not. You see, that's how we get along here, you see, said Hazel to the staring Blackavar. You'll get used to us after a bit. Now, let's look for somewhere dry, that no one else has found, and perhaps we'll get some sleep too. And every dry spot among the undergrowth seemed to be crowded with exhausted sleeping rabbits, and after searching for a time, they found a fallen tree trunk, from the underside of which the bark had pulled away. They crept beneath the twigs and leaves, settled themselves in the smooth, curved trough, which soon took on some of the warmth of their bodies, and they slept at once.